for Tuesday, May 13, 2025. And we will start tonight's session by asking for public comment. Is there any public comment on non-agenda items? And we don't take them online right now. So seeing none, we will move right along to our work session, recommended supplemental budget. And I turn it over to Janine Jordan and Director Wade.
Good evening, everybody. I appreciate you being willing to come down into this kind of more work session, workshopping kind of format. Feels a little different, particularly for those of you that are new to council. So you like it? Okay. It's a little easier, I think, for staff when we're making budget presentations. And so we have staff in the member room, and they will join us throughout the evening at their assigned spot down at the other end of the table, so thanks. We're going to start off tonight with the budget in brief, and I have to begin discussing this by acknowledging that this is a new document for the city of Laramie this year. It's just literally what it says, an abbreviated version of the recommended budget. We have wanted to create a document like this that's maybe a little less, well, a lot less pages and a lot less information, and rolling up the information in ways that we hope is easier for the public to take in. So we're just going to walk you quickly through that, and what it is designed to do is not to give every single piece of data for folks, but to roll that up into really a more visual, user-friendly way of looking at the budget. I'll start off just in the first pages of it, and I know you have it in front of you as well, and I'm on page 2 of 22. We want to acknowledge the participation of the City Manager's Budget Advisory Committee, which helped us to develop this first ever budget in brief this year. They gave a lot of feedback on the draft, and Jennifer Wade walked them through that, and so they definitely have been a critical and a pivotal part of shaping what this document looks like, and will continue to be in future years, I suspect, as well. You can see our Budget Advisory Committee pictured there on page 2, at least the folks who were there that day.
We thought maybe the Vice Mayor was having audio.
Oh.
But her hand is now back.
Okay.
Hey guys, we can't hear anything in the room. I don't know if you can hear us.
So you can't
We could hear you at first, but can't hear you now.
Okay. Thank you. We'll keep working on that.
Can you hear Janine now?
Jim, can you hear me?
We can hear you, Vice Mayor.
Yep,
Do you wanna-
Mike, I can hear you.
Okay, do you want to test, Janine?
Can you hear me?
Oh.
Micah, can you hear us now?
Yes. She's
Now we can.
Okay. Very good.
I don't know.
I'll be more attentive to the microphone here.
But it was just totally muted, so I don't know what happened.
Okay.
We're good now, though. Thanks.
Okay, very good. So I was saying on page 2 of the budget in brief, you can see our City Manager's Budget Advisory folks from a recent meeting. We are missing a number in the picture, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So we were, about half of the crew were present this day, unfortunately, as we were getting this ready. But if you'll make note of those names, and if you see those individuals around town, maybe a shout out to recognize their service, that would be great. So I will move forward. The introduction on page 3 and 4 is just a look at, basics about the City of Laramie form of government, the composition and myriad of services that the city provides. And then on page 5, we really get into the visuals, as I said, depicting the budget document in a way that hopefully is really visual and a little bit interactive for individuals. So when you look at the adjusted budget, or what we will talk to you about last week and then throughout the rest of these meetings as being where we're recommending changes in year 2 of the budget, the adjusted budget, if you approve all those, would have this sort of look and weight to it. So for instance, instance, essential public infrastructure services would comprise 48% of the total budget. Economic development projects, 10%. I'll note for you, that's a high number for us, 10%, and what's driving that, of course, is the Wyotech grant and loan at $10 million. So that looks like a lot because we have one very large project that we'll be moving forward with this year. Police, E911 dispatch and animal control services are 9%, fire suppression and 911, ambulance response, 8%. HR, finance, IT, and risk management, like we have to shove them all into this little box because they're only 3%. Our general costs of government, which are the overhead expenses that we talked about last week that typically are found in the general services or general government cost center, comprise about 2%. Those are things like our liability and property insurance, things that are expenses across the organization. Parks and Recreation, Public Services, 8%. Judicial and Legal is 2%. City Administration, the clerk and the council, 2%. I'm at the very bottom now in the little boxes. And we were somehow able to cram Community and Economic Development at 1% into a teeny little box. And City Facilities and our Fleet Operations also 1%. So again, just a more instinctive way of looking at the budget. Then below that, we do provide more detail about what's included in each of those services. And then moving on to page 6, here you start to see the numbers, but we didn't want to hit people with numbers out of the gate, right? We wanted to give that more intuitive weight through the tree maps. As you look at page 6 and the other spreadsheets in this document, I'll note something that you may want to think about. In your budget document, we typically depict from left to right in the columns, we'll depict budget history. So the leftmost column will be a prior year, the rightmost column will be current year. In this document, that is flipped, and so keep that in mind. For instance, looking at the top of page 6, as you look at the first row there, water utility services, you see that first leftmost row, there's your adjusted budget. For water utility services, it would be $18,081,080 with the budget adjusted as recommended. You'll note on this page, at the bottom of the page, that the change is actually the rightmost column, change from 2025 original budget to 2026 as recommended for change would be a decrease of 3% across all city services and operations. And then on the next page, I think we start to look at revenue. Let me go there. I'll move to page 7. We do have a couple other charts here, types of expenditures. So again, these are rolled up into those types of spending. You can see capital investment and studies is for the adjusted budget, $37 million. The next largest category of expenses, wages, benefit, and employee taxes. So this would be all of our payroll and then our employer expenses at $33,907,587. And then we get into the smaller categories. And this just reinforces what we always tell council. Capital investment, infrastructure, by far our largest category of expenditure, personnel being our next highest. And this is consistent across many years in budget cycles. Also at the bottom of that page 6, there is the breakdown by funds. You can see the weight of our business enterprise type funds against the weight of the general fund. Our enterprise funds slightly outweigh spending at 40% of all spending compared to general fund at 37%. Our other governmental funds, these are the little tiny funds like the cemetery perpetual trust fund and things of that nature. They're at 16%. And then your specific purpose tax fund, as powerful as we know that penny is a pretty small box in comparison to all of these other funds at only 6%. Then on recommendation of our Budget Advisory Committee, we did on page 8 really take a look at personnel costs. This is, as you well know, as elected officials, an area that people are always keenly interested in every year. You can see what I told you actually at the beginning of our work sessions, that we, like other employers, have seen really unprecedented growth as we've tried to make sure that our our pay scales and what we pay keeps up with inflation since the COVID pandemic in 2020. We've seen a change from 22 to 26 of 22%. Boy, that's a lot of twos. In our personnel expenses, or excuse me, in all of our in personnel. I'm getting ahead of myself. What I really like about this chart is Director Wade did some research because, of course, I think for both myself and Director Wade, as well as our other directors, that's a pretty shocking number. I'd never thought in my lifetime managing a city I'd see personnel expense grow in 5 years by 22%, right? That's a lot. So we looked at some other data just to see, well, how do we compare? And again, this is on recommendation with our Budget Advisory Committee. And you can see the chart that Jen's included here from the Bureau of Labor Statistics is pretty informative. Laramie is, although we feel special, we're not that special. Hi, welcome. Compared to other private and public sector employers. And this chart at the bottom shows you private industry in the maroon line and government in the blue line, and shows the trend in wages and compensation. And so we're fairly well aligned, our growth at about 19% in the same period as reflected in that chart there. And Jen, this is your work. Is there anything you'd like to add here?
I'd just like to add, of course, that the graph from the Employment Cost Index does include like the entire basket of labor, but I'm not clear if it really accounts for like growth in number of positions. That's what I don't quite know. And in the city data, you are absolutely looking at that. And so that's the one caveat I would offer about using this census data only.
Does that make sense to everybody? Okay. So moving to page 9, now we're looking more specifically at just the supplemental budget that's being recommended to you and how that is comprised. You'll see 86% is for one-time funding. Again, we talked about this generally last week as well. And 3% is, 86% is for that one-time funding. There's only been one amendment in fiscal 26 to date, and that's that $74,754 from a few weeks ago, a few months ago. You can see the original recommendation, how that looks, and the source of funding coming to it. So for instance, the Economic Development Fund at the page of 8 is noted with the grant, loan, and lease of $10,637,689 that I mentioned earlier as being for the Wyotech expansion project. And then a little shout out at the bottom of page 8 to the notion that we will have a new surface water drainage fee coming online July 1st with the installation of the surface water drainage utility and fund. And then moving to page 9, I promised you all we would talk about the budget survey results that were handed out last week. And so the budget in brief is really a chance for us to take a look at that. I'll remind you, we had 217 surveys submitted that were complete. So 217 is not anything to sneeze at, but we would really like to get participation up. And then the other reminders about this data that we discussed last week, it heavily overrepresents people with bachelor's degrees or higher. It also heavily overrepresents older individuals in the community and pretty dramatically underrepresents our population that is 30 and under. So just a few caveats as you look at this data. It would be probably not appropriate to consider it representative of the community on the whole, but any data is going to be good data and it's going to help to be informative. So the allocated resources by the citizens in the budget survey is the large chart that you see. And of course, they, when given the opportunity to allocate funding, put 18.5% toward drinking water. That was the highest amount. Police received the second highest amount at 17.7%, streets at 15.4% in third place, and fire and EMS response at 12.9%. When I look at these categories from most allocated to least allocated, they're pretty consistent across time. I think the whole of this chart is what we see in most of our survey data in most years, going back probably a decade. And then at the bottom, you can see the comparison, this is the fun part, between what the folks who answered the budget survey said and how they would allocate funding compared to how we actually allocate funding in this 2-year biennium budget. So moving from left to right, you'll see, for instance, in drinking water, the public, although they always feel that's a very important category of spending, they actually allocated less toward drinking water, 18%, than we actually allocate in this budget, which is 27%. E911 and police being second most important, they allocated 18% of the budget, whereas we allocate 12%. Streets was just about on par. This one was pretty interesting. I can't quite read the number, but I think it's 15% by the survey respondents, and that is equal to what we have. Fire EMS is also roughly equal between responses and the actual budget. In solid waste, the public allocated just a bit more than we do by 3%, and in wastewater, they allocated a little bit less. As we've looked at these numbers as staff, I believe, and I think Jen may share my opinion here, as does maybe Brooks, that when it comes to drinking water, wastewater, I think the public often just don't appreciate how very expensive the infrastructure associated with those things is. And so one of the things we've talked about is when we say drinking water is super important, right? If you just look at that term, what does that mean? Well, drinking water, heavens, that's important. But what we don't say here is maybe drinking water and associated infrastructure. And typically, and so those feel really different, right? Pipes under the ground versus, oh my gosh, drinking water, invaluable. So we could probably fine tune the language a little bit to try to help you articulate more what we mean. When we say drinking water, we think of that whole system of pipes and pumps and treatment plants and all those things. And similarly with wastewater, same kind of thing. Really important service, but the plant and the fixtures that come in that expense are really sizable and maybe not well understood. What are you guys' thoughts on this? Any immediate reactions to the data?
Councilor Lockhart.
Thanks, Mayor. I just wish we'd get more respondents. That's the main thing, out of how many adults we have in this community versus 217 surveys. It'd be great to see, 1,000, for example,
Yeah.
So, but like you said, any data is good data.
Councilor Newman.
This isn't a question you can answer, but I would want to kind of pick the brains of the public and want to know, like in E911 and police, what they think we should add, because they allocated way more money than we did. And so is there something that we're lacking that maybe the public sees that we haven't thought of? It's kind of interesting because that's the one that's like a lot different than what we spend.
Yeah, that's true.
I see no further questions.
I will say we will keep, of course, this is the second year we've done a budget-specific survey. I'm kind of on the fence about whether, well, I guess I'll just say, we have this new cool survey tool the last couple of years through Zen City, and we're just surveying on everything. That Environmental Advisory Committee do a survey. We do our general community survey, which is data collection periods are in the fall and in the summer, that asks some similar questions to the budget survey. And then we've got the budget survey. And so maybe something we can all chew on and talk about later in the year is, I'm not necessarily saying we should shelve the budget survey, but maybe we could refine the community survey to gather that data, because I wonder if we're giving our community survey fatigue, I don't know, or if they're seeing like this one and they're saying, well, I just filled that out, but they're thinking of the fall community survey. So something we can think about. I appreciate you guys' perspective on as we move forward. Okay, and now we're going to move into the revenue section, so I'll likely lean on Director Wade here, as this is really her expertise area. You're welcome to take it over, or you're welcome to jump in as needed. You want to take it over?
I'll just jump in.
Okay, sounds good. So as we look at sources of revenue to pay for city services, this is also a question people want to know, like, where do you get the money? And I think really what oftentimes our residents are getting to is, how much do I pay, right, as an individual or as a household? So here again is this tree map just showing kind of the weight in a visual way of the amount of, or of the types of revenue. Our local user charges are about 36% of all revenue that pays for city services, and then our sales and use taxes, the two local pennies are 16%. The state shared sales and use tax, the first 4 pennies on every dollar, what we receive from that is 11%. Other state and federal revenues, 15%. We may see that changing, of course, in the next few years as the federal government and state government adjust how they do business and how they maybe support localities. State share taxes from mineral production, Director Wade touched on this and the other smaller boxes here in pretty great level of detail last week, so I won't go into that. And then there's a description there to help folks understand what each of those terms means. Page 12 is, I think, a great addition to the information that we're providing to the public with respect to what community members directly pay to support the city's services. And so here you see our 26 adjusted forecast by the origin of that revenue type. And you can see at the very bottom, resident and property owner generated revenue is the largest of the categories, but still only 44% of the revenue that we are projecting will support our services in this biennium. Resident-generated sales and use tax is 21%. Yes?
Councilor O'Doherty.
Where do the grants fit into this
My
picture?
question.
Is that miscellaneous income?
Yes, and I think there could be some in state shared revenue and other than sales tax. There could be some in other federal and state revenue as well. That hit all the categories you put it in? Okay. And then at the bottom of page 12, again, we're looking at the sources of those revenues. We talk a lot about intergovernmental revenue, which can come from federal and state sources. This tries to break that down a little more finely to show state aid and federal aid. From the state of Wyoming, about 35% of revenue is going to be in that source, where from the federal government, wait, what am I looking at here, Joe?
This is
Actually, that one.
I'm sorry, I'm going to let you talk about it. Yeah, I can't read the numbers.
So I was super happy to actually find this graphic, and I deemed it reliable because it was compiled using information from the Wyoming Taxpayers Association. So I've cited this source, but what we're trying to get at is, like, you know, I think there's a lot of rhetoric right now about certain types of revenue, and there's good reason for that, because there's different ways that local government is funded across the country, but they don't necessarily translate to what we experience locally in Wyoming. And so this chart really shows you, as of 2021 at least, how Wyoming stacks up, if you will, how we compare to how we fund local government compared to the rest of the country. You'll see we are high in user charges. That is a Wyoming thing. You can see that reflected in our revenue distribution. You can see that we are lower on property tax than many states, but it helps you understand why property tax is such a big conversation nationally. And you'll see that we, as we probably know, are lower in sales taxes than many other states. So just some good perspective for the community and for you all as elected officials.
Thanks, Jen. Okay, so then let's see, if we go to the next page, we're diving deeper into revenue. I think the notable point here is you'll see the change in revenue from 2025 to 2026 is a decline of 3%. And then on the next page, you'll see the budget summary, again with the tree map and the weighting, showing funding sources alongside expenditure. Essential public infrastructure being by far our largest expenditure, as you know. At the bottom of this page, we really get into that question I opened up with people saying, well, how much do I pay for city government, or how much does my household pay? So the cost of government is reflected there, paid by Laramie's residents and property owners. And then when we look at the fiscal 26 recommended budget, residents and property owners are going to fund about 66% of the city's operations, which is about $54.5 million, and that excludes any interfund transfers as an accounting matter. The chart there is showing you we estimate about 80% of sales and use taxes are collected locally, And that, of course, is because we have fairly high visitation in Albany County for recreation, also for University of Wyoming athletic events and things of that nature. So we do have a lot of our sales and use tax being paid by visitors, by tourists and visitors. When we assume that 80% are paid by local individuals, then and we look at our census population count, which is 32,152, we find and arrive at a net cost of city government per citizen of $1,696 for this FY26 budget. Do you want to add anything, Jen?
The only thing I would add is that the Budget Advisory Committee told us this was really important to try to get at this net cost of government and to dive into this issue of, resident-derived revenue. We did use what we felt were really conservative, defensible numbers. So, for example, we know the population of Laramie is likely greater than that 32,000. We know that 80% is a really conservative number for what is generated locally versus visitors. And so we feel this is a conservative estimate rather than an aggressive estimate, if you will. I'm trying to make this number be as low as possible. This is probably the high number of what that net cost of government would be.
Thanks, Jen. And then we close out the document by really looking at one of the ways that the state of Wyoming has developed for looking at the cost of local government. We talk about this data almost every year here at the City of Laramie because we do believe this is one way that we can look at efficiency in city government services. And also, that was important to our Budget Advisory Committee. How do you know you're efficient, right? But then also, how do you compare to other cities? And for me, those two questions are likely very tied. We've talked with the council over the years about the fact that city governments don't all do the same thing, even though one might think that. That is not the truth. So I always give the example of the city of Gillette, which is roughly the same size in population to the city of Laramie, located in the same state, located on the same eastern side of that same state, and yet we're remarkably different. City of Gillette does not have a fire department. City of Gillette does not provide recreation programs and services. Their county government does both of those functions. So I put that out just as a caveat to remember it's sometimes a little challenging to compare, but we do use the State Department of Audit numbers and reports that they prepare to provide this data to you on page 15. And so what we did is we took a subset of Wyoming cities from the Department of Audit report. There are 6 here: Rock Springs, Casper, Laramie, Sheridan, Cheyenne, and Gillette. And we looked at total spending, inclusive of capital investment, pulled that out of the Department of Audit report, and then also separately looked at total operating cost of government from that report. And what you see when you look at all spending, including capital investment, is that Laramie has the 3rd lowest cost of government when you compare to these other cities. This was really interesting to me this year because being in the middle of the pack is sort of a new place for us, but what's driving this is the tremendous capital investment that we've been making the last 3-4 years. We, according to the state's data here, are actually spending more on capital investment than our sister city to the north, Casper, which is roughly twice our size. So I think that captures really this historic refurbishment of water, sewer, streets, et cetera, that we're engaged in. When you exclude the capital investment and you just look at, in the blue chart at the bottom of page 15, the total operating cost of government, you see that we are kind of in our more traditional spot in this chart, which is at the lowest cost per citizen of those 6 larger communities. And again, this is state of Wyoming data and doesn't account for changes, different service profiles across those cities. Jen, did you want to round out with reserves and sustainability? Okay.
So we know from this actually, the issue of reserves came up less directly from the Budget Advisory Committee, but the city manager and I actually brought this up because we are aware that a lot of the conversation around the state in terms of reducing revenue really comes back to what I will call some, public concern and valid concern around the buildup of reserves in local communities and a lack of maybe the perception of a plan for those reserves and not understanding how they got there. And if you see reserves accumulating for a long period of time and there's no plan, the default assumption is that there's too much revenue, that there's too much there, the government can't get it spent, it's not delivering services, so it must have too much. I think that's a pretty normal assumption, and it's a fair one. And so we wanted to start talking about reserves in Laramie head-on and really directly, so that we can educate the community about why we have the levels of reserve that we have, talk about the plans for use that are already adopted by the City Council, enacted through the budgets that you have approved, or that would be adopted if you approve the 2026 budget as recommended. And so that's really what you see before you for our major operating funds. And so in the general fund, when I was doing budget planning in February, you'll see the $51 million I started with. You'll see the 3 to 6 months of operating reserve, which is actually a city council directive to staff to make sure that we maintain for emergencies. So that's 3 to 6 months of operating expenditures, not all expenditures, and that's a really important distinction, because if we were to include all expenditures, you can imagine what capital investment would do to that reserve. So it's really important that that only be operating. Then you can see estimated unspent reserves related to the 25 capital investment appropriation. Estimated unspent reserves related to prior year capital investment appropriations. As you all know, once you make those capital appropriations, they carry forward until they are spent. And so reserves are held up, if you will, if there is a lag in between when you appropriate them and when they are spent. But in finance, when I am planning for reserves, we have to make sure that those are committed and assigned to these budget appropriations that you've already approved, unless you amend those downward, and then of course those reserves are released back into the unrestricted pot. So really important component there. You'll also see here the reserves that would be committed for capital investment in 2026. This number ties directly to the fund summary in your larger budget publication. And what you'll see us say is that we're only using reserves for capital investment. This number ties to that number. And so we wanted to start just really talking about this more and showing you how we plan and what's left over after we plan. So these are the raw numbers that you're working with, and then the city manager, of course, has told you about some additional recommendations she has this year for the use of some of these reserves. As you know, in the general fund, we have good reasons why these amounts are much larger than we're used to working with, primarily in the form of sales and use tax collections that are one-time from wind energy development in Albany County, as well as, remember, those big direct distribution amounts that we got in 2024, 2025 that are historic, but we're spending after the fact because we're not relying on them to fund our operating. That's all I would have there. Do you want me to do any of the rest of it?
Yeah, that'd be great.
So on the next page, which is page 17 in your document, we wanted to really show a visual for what capital investment costs. I hope we've done so effectively. We would love some feedback here. So we've got this little, I forget what these are called. Does anyone? Word cloud. A word cloud that just kind of shows like the types of projects that we're funding and how much these projects typically cost. I did run each of these numbers by the director that oversees the construction of these types of assets to make sure that my numbers, even though we see those budget numbers all the time, we want to make sure that we're making fair representations. And so when you look at the reserves on the previous page and you start to compare them to the type of infrastructure that we're maintaining and the amount that it costs, hopefully it helps people see or think about the amount of reserves that they think Laramie should have. And something I want to point out, I was really careful in the language I used about reserves. And in particular, on the previous page, on page 16, there's a question that we pose. Can a government hold too much in reserves? And I guess my honest answer to that is, well, I think it really depends. It depends on if there's a plan, if there's public satisfaction with the overall value a government returns for the resources it holds, If you've got a buildup in reserves and you don't have a plan and there's no explanation, maybe that is problematic. And so what we really want people to do is to feel like the information we're providing is helping them answer that question for themselves through looking at the work we're doing together in budget rather than trying to answer it for them. Because I think that's also part of creating trust, is trusting people to use this open-ended information to create their own judgments. And so that's really the goal of these 2 pages of this publication. And the publication just rounds out with some information on debt and capital assets so that folks have a perspective of what those dollars are, what those debt obligations and capital assets are for the city.
Councilor O'Doherty.
If we had a catastrophic failure of some critical infrastructure, our reserve would take care of some of it, but most of our infrastructure is more expensive than we could ever reserve for, right? I mean, the amount of money that we have built into the wastewater treatment plant. So if it was something catastrophic, our reserves really aren't enough to do, if it was, one of our major infrastructure things, right? We couldn't expect to save that much money. We'd have to rely on the state, maybe FEMA if it exists, things like that, right? Because our reserve, that's just way too much. We have so much in infrastructure.
Yeah, you're welcome to. I think what I would say, Counselor, is I think you're absolutely correct. I mean, you look at the plant alone, we think the replacement cost for the water plant could be on par of $70 million. I'm looking at Brooks and Shaw in case they've seen anything more recent, just the plant alone. And that doesn't include all the infrastructure. So wastewater treatment plant, probably a comparable, maybe slightly less amount on the wastewater treatment plant. So when you look at a reserve, say in the water fund of $36 million, I mean, that maybe would deal with a catastrophic failure of some sort at the treatment plant. Or if we needed to start treating our groundwater, which of course we do not treat groundwater right now, it's that high a quality. Brooks, do you want to add anything? Nope. Okay. Jen?
I would say from a financial planning standpoint in the 10-year plan, which you all know the rates are developed around, we would be looking at a reserve. So you'd have, of course, the 90-day operating reserve. But you would also probably have a capital reserve, and that amount would be equal to, like, say, one major project. And so in the water fund, you would want to keep like a $4 million reserve intact for things that you maybe didn't plan on, but were still reasonable because you don't want the ratepayers to be paying for things like a catastrophic plant failure that you can't ever foresee. That would be ridiculous. You would not fund that in a rate. But you are funding a small amount for unforeseen things that is above and beyond that O&M. But again, it's a small, reasonable amount, and it's probably just a project. And the rest of it is based on an actual documented plan.
Okay. If you would like to talk about, oh, go ahead.
Yes. Vice Mayor, you have a question or a comment?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. Just a comment, I guess, in thinking about these reserves and Councilor Doherty talking about, kind of catastrophic something. I think this is a good reason to keep in mind why we build those reserves so that we don't have a catastrophic something. We can continue to make the repairs and updates to things as we need them, understanding that they are expensive, but making sure that those reserves are there to ensure there isn't something that is more expensive down the road. So I appreciate the staff thinking about that and always planning for the future.
Thank you.
Thank you, and it's a very good point. I mean, the reason we have all these projects is to try to keep the house well kept up, right? And make sure the roof isn't leaking, lest you have a catastrophic failure of your roof, for instance, at home. I don't necessarily need to go into the last couple pages of the document, but if you would have any questions or would like us to dive deeper, we can. We talk about our sustainability initiative, which you're well aware we instituted now 6-7 years ago. We talked about that last week with you. And if there's anything else you'd like to touch on, please do. I guess what I would also invite you to do as you are looking at those last couple pages is share this. We hope that this is a much more digestible and small document that people can really wrap their minds around, and serve as a more public-facing document than the budget document does that you guys do the deep dive into as part of these meetings, so. Absolutely.
I just asked your city manager for permission to give an accountant disclosure, and I feel that I need to do this. Do remember that when the larger budget publication is a by fund publication, that's really important because you adopt a budget by fund. When you compile a budget in brief, you do not use a fund level presentation because that muddies the waters. It's not as simple for people, and that's a normal practice. So this is not something that Laramie is just doing. This is kind of an industry standard, so we're not veering out of practice much. We're not veering out at all here. But if you're talking to the public and they're trying to make a connection between the budget in brief and the full budget publication, that's going to be really hard to do because the budget in brief is all funds, all in, no interfund transfers. And it is truth. I mean, the numbers are truth. And they tie out between the two, but it is such a different presentation that my only concern is that for people who are number nerds, who do really like to dive into the details, that they're gonna have a hard time making those connections. I would rather have this out here, have it accessible. I do think it's a really useful document. I actually love it. But for people who wanna dive in deep, that full budget publication is really where they should go.
Okay. Very good. Well, we are ready, I think, to invite some of our directors to join the conversation. We're going to start off, speaking of water, with the water fund, which I believe is on page 149 of your larger budget document. Director Webb and Assistant Director Klein and other members of the water utility are here, and I am going to have Director Webb start talking to you about the water fund budget. And Brooks, let me get to the right page.
149.
There we go, okay. So we will use the same format that we did last week, Council, with the director talking maybe about some of the major accomplishments from last year, objectives for the forthcoming year, and then going over the supplemental recommendations within that budget. And the supplemental recommendations will be found on page 156. So I'll try to give some page number references as Brooks moves through it to just kind of help everybody navigate the document. So you're on 149, Brooks.
Yep, got it. So just to cover some of the accomplishments and objectives that for the water fund for fiscal year 2025, I'm not going to go through every one of them. There's some I wanted to highlight for you. We applied for a grant to conduct a new 10-year water master plan through the Wyoming Water Development Commission. Staff attended the commission meeting last week, and we were approved for that full grant moving forward for the water master plan. So we'll be moving through that process with Wyoming Water Development Commission. We completed the lead and copper rule service line inspections and surveys last year. Utilities Water Division team members participated in the Governor's Wyoming Professional Water Operators Ceremony and proclamation signing ceremony in Cheyenne. And you may recall they came in here after that, the week after that, and we gave them a round of applause and took some pictures. Staffs continue to participate with testing and operation of the nearly completed North Tank project. Staff continues to prepare for full activation of that. I think they turned the pump station on today for the first time. We completed the transition of the Wyotech well users to the City of Laramie municipal system. So out at our municipal operations center, we had some folks that were on our old well system out there, and we've transferred them over to the municipal system now. We purchased a utility sync software that provides big efficiencies for us in our locate capabilities. We've seen a huge reduction in staff time with the locates using that software program. We continue the residential meter change out to the smart meters, be fully interface with the public, and then in the future, they'll be public facing with their smart meters where they can actually go on and look at their consumption live at that minute. We completed an EPA climate risk assessment with the EPA. And then for fiscal year 2026, we got to complete the North Tank project, complete the master plan, complete study on the life and longevity of the water treatment plant. That goes in conjunction with the water master plan that we'll be doing. We're working on a rate study for the water side. And then the Zone 1 tank project is a big project we have coming up, as well as the Pierce Street PRV. Our utility staff will be working with our engineering staff and consultants on those projects. We're going to update the EPA Utility Emergency Response Plan, Risk and Resiliency, and then modernize water utility related SCADA systems. We'll talk a little bit about that as we move along. We've started the replacing old fire hydrants through our hydrant replacement program. And we have a goal to exercise 50% of the valves throughout the system. That's with our valve replacement, with the valve turn trailer we got a little while back, you may recall, and staff's moving forward with that, and we're making good progress on getting all the valves turned and operated. So that's goals and objectives. Supplemental recommendations, I'm going to hop forward to 157. Yep.
Did I ask you to give a little detail on phase 2 of the plan, the federal lead copper solution? And I'm asking this because for your council, this is a topic of some consternation. I'm asking for that, council, because this is a topic of consternation for many of the other cities and towns in Wyoming. So you may hear WHAM talking about this and working with our federal partners on moving to phase 2 now that we've identified lead and copper and galvanized pipe in our system. Can I put someone on the spot
Sure.
with that?
Yeah.
What are we doing in the future?
Yeah, so phase 2 is still a little cloudy. We're still working through it with the state consultants. The state had hired some consultants for the lead and copper program. Now that we've identified everything, we've submitted everything to the EPA. EPA is hard to get a hold of these days with everything that's changing in the federal government right now. But so we identified, I don't remember the number on galvanized. Do you remember? 924 galvanized service lines that may need replacement. And so we're working through the consultant and the EPA to see if those indeed will need replacement, if they all will need replacement. And we've submitted through the intended use plan with the state for funding for that, as has just about every other community throughout the state. So right now, we're still working through things, but the phase 2 part that I think is going to be replacing some of the galvanized service lines that have been located.
Director Webb, I'm just curious, when you've identified the galvanized service line for 900-plus residents, are they notified of that, or is that more internal information toward city infrastructure?
Yeah, Mayor, we have that information, and we're working with the EPA right now to there will be a notification, and what that notification requires is, it's really, the EPA is developing that notification. We've got to use kind of their process. We can't just make up our own letter. So there will be a notification. There'll be some dedicated web page for folks to go look at. So that is coming.
And a follow-up, if there is galvanized pipe, service pipe going into the house, then would that also suggest that there's galvanized piping within the house?
Possibly. And some of those we were able to identify because we have a lot of meters that we've moved inside now. And so there's a lot of them where we can look at and we see that maybe it's galvanized. But for us, the service line up to the main is what we're dealing with. Everything on the other side of that meter is plumbing, right? So not part of our system, if that makes sense.
Yes. But that type of pipe then has some health risk attached to it.
Mayor, I think that's controversial. I think it's, the idea is if there was ever lead upstream of the galvanized, the lead could have became embedded into the galvanized, okay? If we can prove there was no lead upstream, then we can cross those off the list, but that's kind of hard to do with a system as old as ours, right? I don't know if there was lead somewhere in the system 100 years ago in certain areas. We do know in certain areas there wasn't, right? The newer places that were built, obviously lead wasn't allowed to be used. So still a lot of evaluation going on there.
Thank you, that was helpful. Councilor Bowling?
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Director Webb. This is really helpful. If I missed this, I apologize. But in phase 2, when we identify, say, 924 galvanized service lines, is there a procedure or a metric by which we determine the priority of those replacements based on public safety?
Councilor Bowling, through you, Mayor, I'm not sure that that's been developed other than, I know there's been a lot of talks about schools, preschools, things like that. But as far as residential homes, I would assume they're all equal.
Thank you. I see no further questions.
Okay, we'll move on to 157. So a few supplementals in the water fund. First, at the bottom of page 157, you'll see in the pumps and wells division, we're requesting a $20,000 ongoing for electricity. That's for the new North Tank Pump Station. As I mentioned, that started up today for the first time. So we're going to start seeing some charges on for that new facility out there. And we estimated that $20,000 based off of other pump stations. And we'll monitor that with Jen and her folks as we go on if we need to make adjustments to that number. On 158, the water treatment plant, operating supplies, we're requesting or recommending an increase in operating supplies for mostly for lab items. We've got a lab out at the water treatment plant where we do our in-house testing, and products there are increasing. And then chemical, we're requesting an additional $25,000. The chemical prices kind of up and down over the last couple of years. They went down. Now we're seeing a little bit of an increase, and then our watershed's changing a little bit. I think some of the fires we had in the past years, a lot of the ash and materials gets into that watershed and kind of changes what's going on there and requires some enhanced treatment.
Council, I'll point out that I think what you've seen in these 3 recommended supplementals for the water fund is largely indicative of what you'll see through all these meetings, which is costs going up, right? Electricity costs for chemicals, reagents, things like that. So that really is a theme in what is recommended to you for the adjustment in year 2. It's just keeping up with the escalation of prices for materials that we need to operate.
I'm down at the bottom of 159 now. 26 supplemental computer workstations, so we're requesting a laptop and docking station for the new water production treatment administrator. Sorry. We found that our old person in that position, the city computer he had was pretty old, and most of the computers he was using was his personal computers. So we need to get Jay a computer and docking station. And then down on page 160, the only supplemental there is the clear well mixer out at the water treatment plant. The clear well mixes the chlorine and the sodium hydroxide evenly throughout the flow of the water to make sure we get an even flow there. And we're noticing that it's approaching the end of its useful life, so that goes to doing that maintenance before that catastrophic failure. The next items are in the capital on page 163, or I'm sorry, 162. Zone 4 tank roof repair at $100,000. So last year we had a wind event that dislodged part of the roof on the Zone 4 tank. The Zone 4 tank is over on the east side of town. It's the one up above the white church, up by the bike. Pilot Peak, sorry, Pilot Peak, yeah. And so part of the roof got tore off last year. Our staff did a temporary repair on it, and it's sealed now, but we need to get a permanent repair done, and staff's been reaching out to engineers and things to get that going. The $100,000, I'm going to be honest with you, is kind of a swag. We hope that covers it. But we're not 100% sure until we get an engineer on board and really dive into it. The next item is the Grant Street pump station security fencing. That pump station is not really on Grant Street. If Grant Street continued, it would be on Grant Street. But it's actually on the west side of Colorado and Venture, if you will. There used to kind of be nothing out there, but as the area's grown up, we're witnessing some vandalism out there. I think some of the kids like to hang out there, and so we'd like to get some security fencing around that infrastructure. And then the next item is the Zone 2 tank security fencing. So that fence, the Zone 2 tanks are up on top of the hill by the hospital there. There's currently no security there, and we hadn't done anything in the past because we didn't own the property. That was part of the City Springs property. So we now own that property, and we get a little bit of vandalism up there every now and then. People like to paint on the tanks because you can see it all over town, and so we'd like to get that area secured. I'll mention too, the security fencing was something when we went through Homeland Security review a few years ago. The security fencing was something big that they had mentioned at our facilities, and so we will be happy to get caught up on that. Then on the next page on 163, out at the treatment plant, we're actually requesting to, I don't want to say reduce, we're moving off into the future years a treatment plant pipelining. And the reason we're moving that out is because we want to do that master plan and that evaluation first to really make sure that's the priority, right? It's a big dollar amount, and we want to get that evaluated and make sure that's really a priority before we go do that project. So we're moving that out past when the master plan and the plan evaluation will be completed. The next item is the water treatment plant security fencing. So our treatment plant supervisor, we no longer have one living at the plant. As you may know, there was living quarters out there, and he lived out there for many, many years. And so now there's not someone there all the time. And so we have some areas that we need to secure that are really open to the public. You could walk right in there right now. And so we're requesting $40,000 for some security fencing in the front of the plant. To keep out people and probably some deer too. I know we get a lot of deer wandering around in there. And then the water treatment plant resident rehabilitation for $65,000. So currently our staff out at the water treatment plant are in a room about the quarter of this size, where they're all bunched in there with their desks and their work, and they have a work table and they have a refrigerator for their break room, and it's really not a great spot for staff to be working. And so the residents, we'd like to go in there and rehab that up so that they have a meeting space, they have an office space separate from their work benches and workspace, and then the residents also will have the kitchen with the break area and stuff too. So separate that dirty work with the clean work, I guess, if you will. And then the big item is our water treatment plant skater replacement. Somebody's going to ask what SCADA means, right? So it's supervisory control and data acquisition. It's really our software and hardware system that allows us to monitor and operate the entire water system. So Scott can be in Saratoga visiting his son, and he gets an alert that a pump stopped working, and so he can get on the SCADA system and turn that pump on or evaluate what that pump is without having to actually run out to the facility. A lot of times we can make those changes internally. And so it really, that controls the system and allows us to monitor it and make decisions on where certain flows should go and things like that. And that system that we have out there is old, it's unsupported. The company that we had is out of business. It's a really important system. Our paging system goes with it, and we've had some issues with the paging system, so if something fails, it pages our guys, and then they can look and see what's happening. But without that paging system, it's all manual, and we don't know what's happening. We're blind. And so it goes back to a full manual system where we got people running all over town. So really important system. It's probably long overdue to get that upgraded. So as far as the supplementals, that's what I've got. I'll take any questions if you have them.
I was just going to make a comment. When we were doing research about the truck turnovers from the fracking wastewater trucks had turned over near the treatment plant at Woods Landing, and we had concerns about contamination, the potential for contamination to the city water supply, and that's when we discovered that system, that it could be turned off and our water would be protected in some type of contamination event like that. So it really is important that we have that upgraded and have that capability.
Absolutely.
Any other questions or comments? Councilor Bowling?
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Director. I think this is just, I commend you guys for this. This is critical public infrastructure, safety infrastructure, maybe the most. I think, as is evident in the way that our survey respondents make that clear to us. And that's not, I don't say that just because when I was a young man, I used to hang out at a pump station and do stuff I wasn't supposed to do in like a rural part of the county. Not here in Illinois. I guess my only question is, like, are there any good deer out there?
We'd have to ask Scott. I know earlier when I said Scott, I saw a few of you look around. Scott's our utility superintendent. So over water and wastewater, and Janine introduced Sean, our deputy director. So yeah, he's the deer guy. He would know. The ones I saw were just little does.
Councilor O'Doherty?
I want to say I really appreciate that you do all you can to avoid catastrophic failures. I was thinking more in terms of acts of God or, yeah. But I really appreciate the thoughtfulness that goes into this and how our staff keeps things going. And this is why I value our staff and want to keep wages competitive. Thank you.
Councilor Lockhart?
Thanks, Mayor. Thank you, Director Webb. In regards to the treatment plant pipelining, so postponing that to the master plan, so then your ask is actually less with the supplemental, since we're not including that, but you're thinking it may need to be done in the future at some point.
Yeah, Councilor, through you, Mayor, it's possible, and that's why we just kind of moved it out for now. If we go through that evaluation and they determine, no, the pipes are fine, or you just need a new plant, we'll deal with that at that point. But we wanted to we think it's an important project, so we wanted to have it there, a placeholder in future years.
Okay, so closing out the water fund, Mayor, in total, the adjustment recommended to the water fund budget, which is about $20 million, each year, the total adjustment recommended is $16,848. That is net of decreases in personnel costs and also the change in the capital projects related to, in a one-time expense that you just talked about. So pretty minor adjustment, almost 17,000 out of 20 million. I was on page 155. Page 155, yeah. Yeah, I'm sorry, that's okay. I like to see numbers too. Okay. So, that would wrap up water fund, and then I believe we can move into the wastewater fund, which starts on page 205.
So I've got, let's see, goals and accomplishments starting on 199. That's where I'm going to go. 199. 199. So for some of the accomplishments for fiscal year _25, the big one we had was the completion of the water treatment plant upgrades with the 20% energy reduction. Our utility staff worked really close with our engineering and consulting folks and the construction crew out there. I know in January we realized it was like $16,500 energy savings in 1 month, so pretty big. Utility staff also assisted with the B-line pipe bursting project and the C-line second phase, 6th Street to Canby. They implemented their manhole replacement program. I think they've got 5 now done this year, 5 manholes replaced this year and a couple more ready to go. And then working with the consultant on design for the West Laramie lift station upgrades. We've been working on that. They've also been, our wastewater folks have been working with GIS to identify the lines and get them properly mapped throughout our GIS system. And then a couple of their objectives for fiscal year 26 is to update the emergency response plan for the wastewater treatment plant and the lift stations, and continue to achieve a 50% hydraulic system washing preventative maintenance program. So our guys have been really aggressive on the CCTV and the washing, and they're trying to get 50% done a year. Every month they have their staff meeting, and it's amazing when I go in there and they say, we did 17,560 feet of line this month. So they're really putting that truck, the camera truck and the vac truck to work. It's really good. So for the wastewater fund, I'm going to jump over to 209 for supplementals. And so they've just got the 2 supplementals there for the wastewater fund, the SCADA computer equipment and software upgrades. So this is a smaller number because it's not a full replacement, so smaller number than what you saw on the water side. This is some upgrades to really cover some costs that were unexpected. And then return activated sludge meters. Again, this is a cost to cover, the cost increased from what we had previously budgeted for, so it's to cover that cost increase. And for wastewater, that's it for supplementals.
Questions or comments? I see none.
There, I didn't step on the mic because it wasn't on. I would note that the adjustment for wastewater is actually a downward adjustment of $38,593 recommended change for the upcoming fiscal year. That's the net change that you would experience. For both water and wastewater fund, there are no changes in personnel. FTE authorizations remain stable. Page 205. And if you have no questions about wastewater, I think we're ready to move into solid waste. But what I will would like to start off with here is noting that I did not ask Director Wade to talk about financial position in the water fund or the wastewater fund because it's pretty stable. I think she does have a note about the solid waste fund and the financial position of that fund, so I'll let her go through that, and then Director Wade can talk about the recommended changes to budget. We are going to be starting off on page 239.
So I actually have a broader note that would apply to all of our enterprise funds. As Director Webb mentioned, for water and wastewater, and probably will mention for solid waste, we are in the middle of rate planning for all of our enterprise funds. For some of our newer council members, we do want you to know solid waste fund in particular has not had rate increases since, gosh, maybe 2018 is if I'm remembering that right. And we actually held rate increases in our water and wastewater funds from 2018 until 2022, if I'm remembering that correctly, just because, you know, of course, the pandemic and its impact on our citizens. And so we've had some modest rate increases over the past few years. We are doing a full cost of service analysis, so really detailed rate evaluation and financial planning across all of these funds. When you see my revenue forecast, you are going to see some upward adjustments. That is purely for consumption variances. That is not at all for rate increases. And so we are not far enough into the planning process to know what the revenue requirement is for the 10-year financial plan. And so this fall, we'll be bringing you recommendations for what those rate changes, if we need them, look like. But I want you to know that that is not what you see in the budget document before you. If you see a revenue change, it's just a consumption increase with those rates being held flat at this point.
Okay, Director Webb.
Okay, so I'm on 239. Some of the accomplishments for fiscal year '25. They just completed the expansion of the break room and office area out there. If you'd ever been out there before, it was really, really small. And so they've got a little bit more room now in there to move around. They're actually going to be moving in there this week. We got substantial completion done, and they were just finishing up some electrical stuff today. And so I'm told by the end of this week, folks will start moving back in to that facility. The single-stream recycling contract was renewed this last year with your approval. And then we recently accepted the delivery of the fully electric pickup truck for solid waste administration. JR, our solid waste manager, wanted to be here tonight, but he gave a tour at the landfill of 35 kindergartners today, and I think he was wore out. So. But anyway, that vehicle came in and it's been put to use, and it's so far proven to be a great vehicle for what we're using it for. No fuel, it's real quiet. It's pretty neat. I got to be honest, I was always one of the skeptical people with the electric vehicles, but I'm pretty pleased with it. It's pretty neat.
I have a question from Councilor Bowling.
Yes. Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Director Webb. I just want to know what kind of truck it is.
Yeah, it's a Ford F-150 Lightning. Yeah, it looks really sharp. So if you see a Ford Lightning white with the city logo on it, wave at JR. The division also is working on converting additional neighborhoods from alley collection to curbside collection, which improves safety and efficiencies. We've had improved outreach continues with our recycling opportunities. I encourage everybody to get on the app. I got a notice from the app this morning that our landfill waiver stuff was open, which I told you about last week. And then in fiscal year '25, we also completed the new household hazardous waste building, which it really improves staff safety and efficiency of processing materials out at the landfill. For fiscal year '26, one of our big projects is to redesign the front entrance area to make that a little safer for people. Since we built that facility 10 years ago, our traffic has increased and sometimes backs out onto the highway there, so we're looking if we can redesign that. And with that project, we'll also be doing designing the next landfill cell expansion. And then one of the big goals JR always puts in here is to find and evaluate additional recycling opportunities for the community. Him and Charles, our recycling diversion coordinator, are always looking for additional ways to recycle materials and divert materials from the landfill. So for the supplemental recommendation, we're over on page 248, and I think there's just one or two there. So on 248, roll-off containers is a deduction, is what JR has found in starting to get some cost for those containers is we probably estimated high when we put that budget together. It was during the COVID time, and so is what he's seeing is that we don't need $60,000, we need $45,000 to replace those. So asking for a decrease of $15,000 for the roll-off containers. The only addition or increase he's asking for is a lube skid. So the lube skid goes into the back of the mechanic's truck. Solid Waste Division has a dedicated mechanic. Lots of expensive equipment at the landfill and our collection vehicles. The lube skid has oil drums on it, waste oil drums on it, grease drums on it. And it allows our mechanic to really be more efficient and safe. Currently, if he's changing the oil on the bulldozer might take 20 gallons of oil, and he's got to haul 5-gallon buckets up and down that ladder all day long. And so it's really hard to, if you've ever heard, keep 3 points of contact when you're climbing on the machine so you don't fall down and hurt yourself. It's kind of hard to do that when you got a 5-gallon bucket of oil in your hand. So with this, it has a hose, and it's pneumatic to where you can just pull the hose up and put the oil in, and they're good to go. So he's climbing up the machine one time instead of 5 or 6 times with this oil in his hand. Really good safety measure for our folks. So for solid waste, that's it. If you have any questions, I'll be happy to answer them.
I just have a comment. It sounds like not only is it a safety measure, but it's going to be far more efficient with time.
Absolutely.
As well. And that type of thing can really lead to back injury, which can be lifelong. So I'm glad to have the lube skid. Any further questions or comments from anybody? I see none.
Wrapping up solid waste, no change in FTE authorizations and a 7,400, page 244, $7,441,000 net change recommended for year 2 of the biennium. We're going to backtrack. If we're ready to move on from solid waste, we're going to backtrack in the book back to page 127, which is your capital construction fund. This is where we track capital projects, largely stemming from general tax revenues. And Public Works does have a few adjustments recommended for year 2 of the budget and capital construction fund. Again, 127.
Yeah, Mayor, so the 2 items we have, the first one is a citywide speed study and safety action plan. We partnered with the county on this. It's for a grant, and that $160,000 you see there is what would be our match on that grant to perform the citywide speed study and that safety action plan. This really isn't an addition. It was in the budget last year. It was just, I think it was in the wrong section. So we're getting it cleaned up and getting it to the capital construction section. And then Adams and Jefferson improvements. So that intersection at Adams and Jefferson, there's a proposed development coming in. And by regulation, they're required to improve the street up to their property line. Well, that property line is in the middle of the intersection, which means they would improve half of that intersection, half the ADA, half the asphalt. And so we're requesting $55,000 to complete that intersection so that we can complete the ADA connections and the entire intersection to help with maintenance in the future and not break down that asphalt in the middle of the intersection. If that development doesn't pan out or come forward, then we won't do the project. So that's what we've got for Public Works.
For Public Works, then in Capital Construction Fund, that change is $215,000. Not really a change since the citywide speed study was already budgeted. I did touch base with the county yesterday on that project. It is lost in the federal limbo that a lot of our federal activities are right now. So we are optimistic and hopeful, having received an award letter for that grant many months ago, that it still is in the pipeline, and the county's talking with the federal government about getting a grant agreement, and we're hoping to see that and then bring that before both the City Council and the Board of Commissioners to be approved for that. And you'll recall, Councilor, that citywide speed study and safety action plan would allow for us to look at not only city streets, but also county roads, to hopefully improve pedestrian, bicycle, and motorist safety and access.
Vice Mayor Richardson, you have a question or a comment?
Thank you, Mayor. City Manager, do you recall what federal department that grant was under?
I wish I could remember. It's probably in the description. Let's go look. If you click on the title, it's going to say right there, isn't it?
It's the Safe Streets for All.
Yeah, this is SS4A, but I can't remember the agency that it comes through. I want to say it's US DOT or Federal Highways. DOT? Okay. Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
You're welcome. Okay. So that's Capital Construction Fund. We can move again backward in the document to, or actually we're going a few pages forward to page 136. And this will take you to the Public Works section of the general fund budget. There are a few supplemental recommendations here, and I'll let Director Brooke talk about those for Public Works Administration, Street, Fleet, and then we have City Engineer Eric Japp here, who may want to touch on engineering.
For general fund administration, you go page 73. Oh, sorry.
Thank you. Did I give
Page 73.
73?
Okay, so Public Works Administration is, that office is really me and my assistant or department coordinator. And we really help all divisions throughout Public Works and other departments throughout the city. Some of our accomplishments for fiscal '24 or for fiscal year '25, completed the stormwater funding feasibility study in conjunction with engineering, and brought an ordinance to City Council creating the Surface Water Drainage Utility Fund. We worked with UPRR to help complete the City Springs property purchase. Submitted a funding assistant request for the Watershed Protection and Flood Prevention Grant Program through NRCS. That's a $30 million grant that we've been accepted into. We were a little worried that we were in the federal limbo there, but I got a call from them yesterday, and they're still moving forward. They'll be here in town next week to do or in 2 weeks to do some facility inspections. So still moving forward. That's a long process with NRCS, but $30 million in stormwater grant funding possible there. We continue to strengthen interagency partnerships. We work a lot with YDOT, the university, UPRR, and the school district. And then we provide administrative support to Traffic Safety Commission, Ranch Advisory Committee, and the Laramie Building Authority. So objectives for fiscal year 2026 is to complete the full cost of service rate study for the enterprise funds, working with Sean and Jen on that. Complete the startup of the surface water drainage utility. Complete the application and acquire funding for the Zone 1 tank project that's SRF funded. Continue researching grant funding opportunities related to all projects and increase outreach and public information related to all public works projects. So for the admin supplemental, we're on page 46. And we have one, and it's a decrease. Yes. So last year we had requested a little bit of part-time money. When we moved into the Municipal Operations Center, we were balancing schedules and stuff, trying to figure out how we could man the front desk for the public all the time. And we thought we might need some part-time help, but we've been able to handle that with existing staff. So we're requesting a decrease in that part-time staffing. And that's the only supplemental for admin. You want me to roll right into streets? Jenny?
It's fine with me, if it's
Okay.
okay with the mayor.
I see no questions or comments right now.
So the street, we're going to go to page 78. I should say street and fleet. So streets, our street folks, a lot of what they do is maintenance, right? They get involved, our manager out there, Shane, gets involved with engineering when they're doing projects, but a lot of the work they do is related to just ongoing continual maintenance of facilities. So Shane liked to highlight that they cleaned 9 miles worth of storm pipe and over 426 inlets with the new sewer vac truck, and we haven't even had that a year. So as I said earlier, they're really putting it to work, and they're proud of that piece of equipment. They replaced 4 alley approaches that were failing and not meeting ADA standards. They continue to use the salt brine, and they've improved their application methods, which has reduced the use of salt and saved immensely on the cost of salt. They installed 8 solar rectangular rapid flashing beacons at crosswalks near elementary schools and the middle school. They completed the concrete grinding downtown between 1st and 3rd Street. And if you remember, we broadened that scope, and those folks are going to be back in town here in the next few weeks to really complete that project. I think they wanted to get here pretty soon and start working around the fire stations and some of the parks and things like that. So we'll see them back in town, and then they're going to complete the entire downtown. And we told them they got to be done before Jubilee Day. So. They applied 2,300 square yards of asphalt overlay in-house. So without a contractor, we did that ourselves. Applied 9 tons of crack seal and 5 tons of mastic. Addressed multiple drainage issues in West Laramie by regrading shoulders and grading water to flow to the drainage system or to the detention ponds. So a lot of times over in West Laramie, when we do the grading, people think it's just to make the road smooth, but a lot of times it's also to improve the drainage there. A lot of work goes in to improving the drainage and the way the water flows over there. If we didn't do that work, there'd be a lot of flooded places. So they spend a lot of time over there. So objectives for 2026 is to continue to grade and apply the material over in West Laramie to improve the roadways and the drainage system. Utilize the sewer jet truck and camera to keep the storm system functioning properly. Continue to address drainage issues in West Laramie. He puts that in there a lot because they're over there a lot. And then continue crack sealing and basically really just continue their maintenance programs. On the fleet side, they maintain over 340 different pieces of equipment and vehicles. And they also help departments to right size and specify vehicles when we go out to bid. So our department heads and our managers work directly with our fleet folks to really look at what their real needs are and make sure they're getting the right piece of equipment for the work they're doing, and they help build those specifications and bid those vehicles. And one of the things I think is really neat in there that Shane likes to put in there every year is to continue to strive for 100% customer satisfaction. And I think that's cool. So for streets, their supplementals are on page 90. So for the CIPP lining, we talked about that last week at the council meeting. You all awarded that contract for this year's CIPP lining. Going forward, we're asking for a reduction in that CIPP lining because we're moving that to the surface water fund. So next week, when we talk about the surface water fund, I won't be here, so when Eric talks about the surface water fund next week, you'll see that CIPP lining number moved over into the surface water side. And then the traffic signal detection project. So we received email from our vendor here a couple months ago that our current traffic signal detection systems are outdated, and they're not going to sell them anymore, and they're going to stop supporting them at the end of 2026. They're working with them. We'll be able to trade in some of the old equipment we have. We're not getting a whole lot for them. but we'll be able to work on some trade-ins. So the traffic signal detection equipment is just that. It detects the traffic, right? So they set this up to where if there's no traffic coming from one direction, that stays red, right? It allows the traffic to flow. The traffic detection system can read if there's somebody in the turn lane, if they need a green light or not, or if we don't need the turn lane to go. It really makes things more efficient for the way traffic moves instead of just having it timed. If it's on timing, you might have to stop and wait 30 seconds for nobody, right? So the traffic detection really helps. The new system that we're looking at also does really good with traffic counting, pedestrian counting, and so we're hoping will help us with some of our engineering studies and things like that, traffic studies as we move forward, working with that system, getting things going. So it's $170,000 to replace $170,030 to replace 13 intersections. I think we have 22 signalized intersections, but they don't all have detection on them. The ones downtown don't have detection on them. And then I think we've got a couple that are timed with YDOT, because YDOT does more timing than detection, and we have a couple that are with them. But we have 13 intersections that are that do have the detection on them that will need to be replaced next year. And for streets, that's it. I'll take any questions if you have them.
Councilor Shumway.
Thank you, Mayor. Director Webb, I think you said you're applying salt. I think it's magnesium chloride, correct?
The magnesium chloride we use for dust suppressant. So we do use magnesium chloride in West Laramie. I don't have it with me, but there's the salt we put down it's a mixture of basically salt. It's not technically magnesium chloride. We used to use purely magnesium chloride, but it's a little bit different mixture now. There's two substances in it that are salt. I don't have off the top of my head. I don't remember what they are.
Councilor Vigil.
Thanks, Director Webb. This is kind of a selfish question, but for the traffic signal detection replacements, is one of those intersections Snowy Range and Pierce by chance? Because I think that one might be broken.
Well, Councilor Vigil, through you, Mayor, I was going to look at my list because Shane gave me a list of the intersections, but Snowy Range and Pierce is a YDOT intersection. And I think we meet with them next week, so we can mention that to them and have them take a look at it.
I see no further questions.
Engineering?
All right, so for ours, we can start on page 73. And I'll kind of go through an overview, just a high-level overview of some of the activities that engineering's been up to and kind of looking into the next year. It's been a very busy year for us. We did complete a comprehensive citywide assessment of ADA ramps and sidewalk throughout the entire city, and we have plans to present this to council in the following months as we kind of wrap up that report. In addition, we completed the construction of 60 new ADA compliant ramps, and we also improved pedestrian and bicycle connectivity through updating roadway striping designs, reinforcing our commitment to multimodal transportation. And this is something that we look at whenever we do a design, whether that's water, sewer, or anything else. Yeah, it kind of continues on. It starts on page 73.
Eric wrote a novel, so it's like 73, 74, 75, 76.
Yeah, so definitely take a look through all of it because there was quite a bit. Brooks kind of mentioned this, but in stormwater management, we did work with several other city staff and consultants to develop the surface drainage utility fund, working with council for approval. This was a major milestone, and it will establish dedicated funding mechanism for long-term drainage infrastructure. And as we move forward in implementation of this program will present a major focus for the engineering division in the year ahead. We've definitely seen an uptick in GIS and mapping over the last few years. This continues to grow as a critical part of our daily city operations, and we see this being integrated in several of new software and programs that other staff is implementing, and we're helping kind of getting that going. Kind of some things to note this year, we did complete a spring aerial flight of the city, and this captured new LiDAR, which allows us to have kind of a surface of the city and a new topo. We also use this data to develop the impervious area for our new surface water program, so they were able to look at all the parcels within the city and actually develop how that was created, along with street center line data and several other things that we did gather that we'll be implementing into our mapping. We created and maintained dozens of maps this last year, from the lead copy inventory that was discussed, to disabled parking, to helping with cemetery plots. And then we actually are just kind of wrapping up right now a new parcel map to support the surface water program. So engineering staff working a little bit with our consultant actually redrew every single parcel within the city of Laramie and deed and lot and everything based off some data. So I'll kind of give a little bit more of an update down the road on that, but that was a pretty heavy lift that basically most of engineering staff worked on for the last few months on that. So these tools enhance the transparency and support compliance and enable more efficient operations across city departments. We also supported the rollout of the new EP&L permitting platform, providing system testing, staff training, and ongoing user support. And then from a construction standpoint, these are kind of high level, but the division oversaw the installation of more than 20,000 feet of water main, 32,000 feet of sanitary sewer, 2,500 feet of storm sewer, constructed the 1 million gallon tank that Brooks has talked about with solar powered controls. And then also, as Brooks mentioned, we have the new updated water treatment plant upgrades. And he kind of noted the monthly, but we're predicting about $214,000 in annual energy savings with that project there. So that was kind of a big deal. Kind of looking into 2026, as I noted, surface water implementation is going to be very big. We'll begin that full-scale implementation of this newly adopted utility. This will include infrastructure improvements, helping with billing setup, the stormwater fee credit program, and also refining the operational strategies to insert. Yeah. Brooks is over here. Thanks. For the long-term success. So roads and pavement management will also be very big for us. We'll continue to prioritize road rehabs and preventative maintenance, managing our pavement condition assessments, and developing paving and drainage solutions, particularly in West Laramie, where we'll evaluate conditions on unpaved roads as part of the long-range improvement planning. We'll also be kind of helping with housing and development with ready infrastructure. We have several major hearing here.
It's because you're underneath the speaker.
Oh, okay.
This was just saying you can move it off to the
Okay,
side a little bit.
sounds good. Good to know. Okay. So as I was noting, we have several major capital projects to kind of help with housing. That'll be the north side tank, working with YDOT for the Bill Nye construction. That will also include sewer. We have the Corthell Hill sewer, which is currently under construction, and then the north side sewer. And all these will help for future housing growth and development opportunities. And just kind of in wrap up, as Laramie continues to grow and evolve, engineering will support the city's broader public works and development. I picked the wrong place, I guess. All right, this microphone works maybe a little better. All right, so we'll continue to work with kind of developing our infrastructure and guiding conduct, with utilities, stormwater systems, and transportation networks for our future needs. And we'll also work with other departments for development projects and studies with the planning department, such as the comp plan and things like that. So any questions on any of those goals? Okay.
Council, questions or comments? I just want to say we've had comments sometimes from constituents. Why are we getting outside consultants for engineering? And when I read this report, it more than answers the why. So I appreciate the thoroughness of your report and that it really shows how intricate engineering is to multiple operations for the city. So thank you very much. Councilor O'Doherty.
I'm very excited about the sidewalk, the pedestrian, all that. And so how will the public get to learn more about the assessment? And I would also love for the public to know, like for the Disability Commission, to see a map, and I'm sure you have them all marked in your GPS, or GIS, to say here are all 60. I didn't know there were that many, and that's really impressive. And I would like the word to get out about that, including our Disability Commission. So I think that's a great accomplishment. Thanks for everything.
Okay. Going on to page 42 of the budget. I'll kind of start on the bottom here, and we'll kind of move up, because I do want to talk on the next one a little bit more. But we do have our request for drone software. As we've kind of been talking about, we are seeing increase in costs, and we use that software to kind of stitch images together, and a lot of our mapping and everything comes from that as well. So we are seeing an increase in cost of that of $2,500. And then we have been talking quite a bit about how we use GIS. That is used through our ESRI program that we have. For years and years and years, we actually partnered with the county on that, and we actually had a shared license that we used with the county, and it worked well. Both the county and the city were happy with that. However, ESRI has kind of changed how their licensing works. So this year, we actually were renewing that with ESRI, and the county and ESRI informed us that we no longer could have a cooperative agreement with the county, that they are discontinuing the ability to use that. So, kind of were noting earlier all the different ways that we use GIS in the city, and it's kind of become a backbone of quite a bit of our infrastructure and everything that we do around the city. So we kind of hope to keep that going and everything, but we do have to get our own license. So that's what you're seeing, that cost. We were able to negotiate that to continue up start kind of lower the first year and then go into increase second and third, and then we'll be paying that full price that third year as it kind of goes on. But we are having to basically fully pay for our own license of GIS starting here on out.
Vice Mayor Richardson, you have a question or comment?
I do, thank you. So that drone software that stitches imagery together, is that potentially, are there enough licenses within that software for it to be used by the communications folks too, to do some drone, if there was imagery that they were able to collect and utilize it, so it's utilized in more than one department?
Your Honorable Mayor, through you. I don't know how exactly they're using it. That is a floating license, so if they did need to use it, they could. We would have to kind of work out the coordination with them, but that could be an option.
Eric, I believe engineering did do the flyover of the Monolith Ranch for some public information that we did a few years ago. So to your question, Councilor Richardson, we do have drones in 2 or 3 sections of the city, and we do share those as needed for whatever the use and application is.
I see no further questions.
Okay, so wrapping up Public Works, in total, the net adjustment in Public Works Administration, Engineering, Street, and Fleet is a downward adjustment of $67,528 within the general fund, and that is on page 72, Council. Director Webb, is there anything else you wanted to add for Public Works?
I do not, unless there's any further questions.
Councilor Bowling?
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, directors. Who controls the thermostat in city council chambers? Is it your department?
That's facilities management. It's not in Public Works.
Just want to take a nap.
That really carry. So the good news is for those who are a little chilly, I think those of us at the front of the room are a bit chilly. We are at the last piece of the presentation. And so I would thank the Public Works folks, unless there's anything else they want to add, and excuse them. And then we can welcome Director Derek Teeney to present your Community and Economic Development Department recommendations, which are very meager and small. So it'll be fast, then we'll go get warm. All right, so Community and Economic Development starts on page 54, I believe.
Yeah, Mayor and Council, as the city manager noted, I think my piece is fairly small, usually in supplemental budget, but I will kind of, as we talk about the broader Economic Development Department, I think it's important to note that the creation of the Economic Development Department and its people underneath it, the Planning Department, Code Administration, or the Building Department that everybody just calls them, your Environmental Health, and then your code enforcement all fall under the Community and Economic Development Department. And that is a newly formed department that is back in style, back in Laramie. And so you'll see kind of within the budget, there are some kind of moving parts to that. And so that's largely what you're seeing in terms of past years into what you have here today. I do think it's important to note the creation of the Economic Development Department, I think, is important long-term for the city of Laramie, and it is this standard practice across the country in terms of how you organize development within your community. It's typically found under one organizational structure and department head. Sometimes these departments, though, do look different. You have sometimes engineering components, public works components in it, different housing components, and that varies just depending upon the size of the community, where you're at, what types of funding you may receive from state or federal agencies. And so I think it's just important to kind of frame that the conversation and kind of what we're talking about tonight. As the council knows, many of your goals that were established this year relate to community and economic development in some fashion or another. That is fairly standard. That is not something that's super unique. It's expected. Often the Community and Economic Development Department and its different divisions kind of touch into a lot of areas and provide support to a lot of other departments and divisions, giving just our broad knowledge to them in terms of helping them get through certain types of projects. I mean, you just heard our Public Works Department talk about, us supporting each other in things like the comprehensive plan or GIS. And so that's fairly common. And so, in this last year, I'm just going to kind of provide just a very quick overview. If you want to see the full breadth, we try to really provide a very comprehensive look at some of the major milestones that we've completed within the Community Economic Development Department. One of the main things we've really spent a lot of time on is public outreach. We've really focused on how do we engage the public better. We feel like with better public engagement, we simply just produce a better product. And product sometimes is odd when we're talking about government, but I think that it truly is indicative of whether it's the studies we do, whether it's just our relationships that we have with the citizens. We've found that to be very fruitful. We've had quite a few different opportunities, not only just with different studies and plans that we've done, but very kind of coordinated outreach events, whether it's been helping the public learn our new EP&L software, attending farmers markets throughout the summer and just engaging them on different major topics that our office is related or has relationship with, all the way to doing contractor licensing workshops and things like that. And really, like I said, that's just an attempt of really engaging and being more involved with the public. For many of us, that's not something that we do often, but we've found it to be a very good thing. We also completed the West Side Plan last year. That was a really great plan done by two students that worked out of our office, out of CU Denver. It's planning school. It's a relationship that we've built over the years with different staff members that have worked for me, that have gone to school there. And so it's provided this community quite an opportunity to have that expertise. We're in the midst of our Reconnecting Communities grant. That's a $300,000 grant that we received to work on improving connections between the west side and West Laramie to the remaining portion of Laramie that's located kind of east of the railroad tracks. We had the growth plan adoption and the Casper Aquifer Protection Plan adoption, along with code updates associated with those. Those were major lifts, and also something that not necessarily we were planning on taking on, but as we were seeing transitions within the environmental office there, where Jay Smith was formerly at, and now Ben Levine is there, we helped along with that, and I think we're now on a really good position with both those projects. You heard, though, with many probably other departments, the EP&L and the EP&R software that we are, all of our licensing and permitting is now done online. That was a large piece of the staff time that we've had over the last year, focused on just really making that a good product for the public. That continues to be something that we keep working on, but it's been a great milestone that really has put us kind of into that next place in terms of how most modern cities are doing those licensing and permitting processes. We have spent a lot of time on housing. I think you all hear us talk about housing very often, but we're engaged in housing conversations very regularly. As you probably, some of you know, we're working on project-specific things like the 4th Street project, working on selling lots within the Turner Tract, Slade Elementary School, other public-private partnerships. But also we're doing things like supporting the city manager's office and other departments in legislative updates and things that are happening at the state level. We're in local housing coalition meetings. We're supporting the Urban Renewal Authority. There's just a lot of things going on in that housing realm, and that we are spending quite a lot of time there, and we're actually achieving quite a few major milestones in that area. Volunteerism through mainly our code enforcement office is really picked up. We've had some, not only the rollout of the volunteer software, but just using volunteers to accomplish things that we just want to get done in the community. We also have a relationship with the drug court here, and we often help those members of drug court get many of their community service hours, and that relationship has been a great relationship as well. We have established and have fully staffed the Building and Fire Code Board of Appeals. It's a not often used board, but it's one of those boards you want to have ready to go so that we can address issues really specifically related to development. And so we've got a very good membership right now, and we're excited about maybe just not having any cases, but just having it there in case we do. A few other things that I'd like to touch on. I think we would be remiss not to talk about the completion of the home base, the old Kmart, the Ulta Ross project. We have completed filling all of the space. Learned today that maybe the very last space will be filled, but that is, I think, a testament to really going forward, trying something different that this community has not seen, and developing an agreement that gets us further along in meeting the needs of our community, which we've heard expressed in the different surveys and things that they desire, but also too just improving our tax base, improving an area that was kind of looking run down and blighted. And so where we're at is, I think that kind of starts to achieve some of those goals that we wanted to of really improving our community, but also to kind of setting ourselves up for the future in terms of maybe using this good experience into maybe other experiences that can translate to other benefits in other difficult areas. So wayfinding signage is much on its way. We have a large batch of signs waiting in Casper for us for pickup, and then installation, as well as soon as 3rd Street gets done, we'll be able to install all the signs along the 3rd Street corridor, which actually there's quite a few along there. Community cleanup, I always like to touch on that. If you didn't know, that was the past couple weeks here. It's run out of our code enforcement office, and really that is just a community-wide effort of kind of, I call it spring cleaning, the spring cleaning of Laramie, and it's really great. We get a lot of community organizations that participate in that, and really just kind of dresses up our community kind of before parents come back for UW graduation, before families visit for high school graduation, and just it's just a good thing for our community. Last thing I want to mention is contractor licensing and our code administration department. They've spent a significant amount of time in working through the permitting process on our new online permitting software. But this last year, we established contractor licensing all online. We had some hiccups. It's pretty standard with new software. However, we found significant time savings in that, and actually next year we're really excited about not spending about 2 straight months focusing on just getting people licensing their licenses when that shouldn't be that big of a lift. And so overall, that's just a really broad overview. That, like I said, there's quite a few other things in there that kind of achieve some of those council goals, not only of past councils, but of the current council here. What I would like to do is jump into, it's on page, I think it's 40 here. 40 is the some of the supplemental budget requests there. You'll see we're looking at $4,800, and we're just looking at some fairly small modifications. One's related to dues, memberships, and professional services. With the Economic Development Department and planning staff being separated, we just needed a little bit of a budget adjustment there to ensure that we can continue with professional development, staying on top of trends, and just meeting, going to conferences and doing those types of things. Casting devices, that's just a small request that allows us to go pretty much into most public spaces and use our computers to project up onto their TVs and things. It's actually, we found it to be really convenient. It allows us to engage, like, even in people's, like, I don't know, like office spaces. So we just do that. Light meters, we're trying to take a look and see if we can measure light a little bit better. We do have lighting regulations within the city, and so this allows us to properly look at those. Right now, what we do is rely on engineers to provide us stamped documents that say that it meets those requirements, which, I mean, I believe that those are there, but this does help us understand the lighting a little bit better. Trail camera and equipment is kind of the largest piece. What we use this actually for is pedestrian bike traffic. In areas around our community, it helps us understand where people are actually traveling, and those usually multimodal transportation. We got our public works department, they figure out where cars go, YDOT figures out where cars go, but it's all these other places, and it's also, it's places you don't traditionally think, the kind of the cut-throughs, the places where maybe there isn't sidewalk. Really being able to understand that's pretty key for us. Last, office supplies, just adjustments related to the changes in community and economic development and planning. And so I think with that, I don't think I have much else to mention. So I would be open for questions.
I'll just point out, Council, so the Community and Economic Development Department is a very small department from a budgetary standpoint, about $1.5 million, $1.4 million. Of that expense, usually 80 to 90% is people. This is a human capital intensive department, and so that is why you see me recommending an adjustment of $400 for office supplies, because there's not a lot of room to move in that budget or absorb increases in just the cost of Post-it notes and paper and all of the inflationary increases that we're seeing. In total for this department, the adjustment recommended for the second year of the biennium is actually a downward adjustment of $16,528. Wait, I think I just read that wrong. $16,982, excuse me, against a budget of $1.466 million. And the reason that that is a net downward adjustment, after hearing Derek talk about requests for increase, is that we've had, of course, changes in personnel expense, as people may say, drop their children from their insurance or those kinds of things. So those internal, centrally budgeted changes net out to a decrease in the budget for this department. I'm sorry, page 54.
Yep.
Questions or comments? Councilor Bowling?
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Director Tenney. Small department, not an unimportant department. Thank you. This is a sort of a silly personal question, but the trail camera equipment and the places that it's, how does that differ from, say, what some of us might be used to using in the wilderness? I mean, I feel like if I was walking around part of, say, Pilot Hill or maybe even part of the Greenbelt, and I saw a trail camera that maybe wasn't marked as something that the city had installed, I might be a little suspect to see it there, so.
Yeah, Mayor, through you, the trail, we're calling it that because what it is essentially it's a counter, and we're not, it's not necessarily videos or cameras, it captures motion through cameras with a camera. And really, it's, like I said, it's all about counting. They usually have like special cases and things. And a lot of times, like, we're not trying to hide them usually either. Like, this isn't like, we're not trying to go after wildlife, right? Like, what we're trying to do is figure out numbers of people that are walking on sidewalks or maybe cutting through an alleyway or something like that. And I mean, we'll slap a logo on it. We're not, we're not trying to, like, it's going to be, and then a lot of times you put them in protective cases so people don't steal them. I know it sounds horrible, but that's, So, and that's, we've got, Parks and Rec has some simple ones that they use, like on the Greenbelt in multiple places. You can see them located on the bridges and things like that. And that's really what we're trying to do, is just use that as an effort, kind of data collection tool.
Councilor Doherty, did you? No? Councilor Freed, you have a question or a comment?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. Yeah, thank you, Director Tini. My only comment would be, I think the Traffic Safety Commission would be really interested in those game cams and where to put them, and would be very interested in how we can collect data that could help them with some of their decision making. But I think it's a great idea. Thanks.
And I just want to commend you and your department for all of the outreach that you have done. I've attended most, and your time at the farmers market, the West Side Project, just the participation of the planning staff in the Housing Coalition has just made such a difference, and the way that the city has supported the Housing Coalition has, I think, really helped it to be more successful and to be a better working group. So I notice, and thank you.
You're welcome.
I see no further questions.
Okay, with that then, we've covered the content we had scheduled for tonight, and we're only 5 minutes overdue. Pretty amazing. I know budget fatigue is real, and so we've tried to keep these at about 2-hour little chunks so everybody can be well rested, which you will need to be, because of course we're back here tomorrow night for another potentially 2-hour chunk. We will cover police and the various activities under the police department, city attorney's office, administrative services, and parks, recreation, and community services tomorrow, and hopefully we'll do that in 2 hours. And I believe Director Wade has a reminder to close out.
And I do need to ask for public comment. Should I? Let me do that before Director Wade. Is there any public comment on this work agenda item? Okay, seeing none. Director Wade, please take us out until we get to updates and agenda review.
Happy to do so. So yesterday, you got an email from me with forms for the special meeting on May the 19th. We have a lot of new council members this year, so I want to just tell you a little bit about what this special meeting is. So we'll start off on the 19th with a work session, which is the format we've been in. Then we'll transition to a special meeting in which you, as council members, have the ability to make motions to change the recommended budget, and your fellow council members will have the ability to vote on those motions. So you may have some ideas running around in your head, I bet you do, but sometimes getting those ideas into a motion is more work than you think. And those special meeting motions are due from you no later than 2 p.m. this Friday. And so please get in contact with the city manager, with me. Go ahead and tell us if you have some ideas on your mind, because sometimes what we find is there are like 3 departments to get together to make this idea something that we know that can work and that is ready for that motion. That is not always the case, but sometimes it actually is. And so I wanted to take a moment and explain that a little bit and just tell you to not be bashful. It's okay to not have an idea be fully formed. And in fact, by talking through it, sometimes that forming happens just as you're discussing it with someone else. So we will ask you questions to get to your intention, rather than to sway you to like an outcome that we will want. And so that's kind of our commitment to you. So do get in touch if you need anything. And we look forward to hearing about your ideas.
Thank you, Director Wade. And seeing no questions at this point for Director Wade, we will move on in the agenda and go to City Council updates. And I'll start with Councilor Vigil and After Counselor Newman, I'll go up to the counselors online, and then we'll continue around. Counselor Vigil.
Great, thank you, Mayor. So prior to this work session today, I was at the Laramie Public Art Coalition board meeting, and so just a couple updates from that point. The board has hired some interim director support from Magpie Consulting. Her name is Desiree. She helps with a number of arts types of organizations, including Art Cheyenne. And so the purpose there is just to really, we kind of have a newer board. And so just making sure that all of our financial pieces, all of those, closing out projects, helping with new projects, all of those kinds of things are in order. And I know that there's been some concerns with losing some NEA funding, et cetera. So more to come on that front. Right now is a really critical time to be supporting our arts community here in Laramie. And then second update is the Laramie Human Rights and Relations Commission meets tomorrow. Unfortunately, I can only attend 15 minutes of that meeting with our work session tomorrow night. So looking forward to learning more there. Thanks.
Thank you. Councilor Lockhart.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm on the liaison on the the Planning Commission, and they've canceled the last 2 meetings with no agenda. So haven't had anything there.
Okay.
Yay, I guess. I don't know, maybe not. Albany County Tourism Board, though, we had our quarterly planning meeting week and a half ago or something like that, whereas a follow-up from the first one that they had a consultant hired, and it's so interesting to look at the trends that we have in the community, and the biggest tourism we need, would believe it or not, it's the winter months. That's where our numbers are down. Of course, we have our snowmobiling and our things up in the snowy range, but the outdoor activities like our baseball and soccer and whatnot, softball, and camping and whatnot, those bring us more room rents than they do the winter. So one of the things working on is how do we increase the winter? Mm-hmm. And so a lot of brainstorming there. I think something that would really help us, because I don't know how you guys are, but as a small business owner, when we have the soccer tournament, the indoor soccer tournament over New Year's, it's a huge boost to us in a really down time because all the students are gone. So lots of talk about indoor youth sports facilities. And we would like some nicer ones for the outdoor too, but we have only so many hotels rooms to be able to have, you have only so many rooms people can get in the summer because we need more hotels, but the winter there's plenty of rooms available. So that's one of the topics of discussion. Another one is, in the wintertime up at Snowy Range in Centennial, it's been tough keeping help at a lot of these establishments because it's 30-mile drive each way. And so trying to figure out maybe some housing for them up there or whatnot, some alternatives. So just very, very interesting conversations, and it's a good team. Unfortunately, the executive director, they did let go there only because when she signed her contract, she lives here in Cheyenne, and was trying to make the move permanently here and could not due to kids and things of that nature, so they did have to let her go. So they promoted Sarah, I can't remember Sarah's last name, I think Haugen, I could be mistaken, that works there at Visit Laramie to the executive position, which I found out the other day. So, and they have a great team over there, so I really enjoyed working with them. That's all I have.
Okay, thank you. Councilor Newman.
Mine will be pretty quick. LCBA met, and Assistant City Manager Todd Fieser sent you guys all an email about what we talked about. So it was just Saffron and their pullout. So that was the majority of kind of what they talked about. So you guys already have an update on that.
Okay. Okay, thank you. Vice Mayor Richardson.
All right, mine's pretty quick as well. Attended the housing meeting on Monday with a lot of some of the other of you, which seemed great. I think the different groups are moving along nicely, which is positive. I also attended the Main Street meeting on the 5th. They are looking at an MOU to work with the Downtown Development Authority in a downtown plan. They also, Trey was going to be working with the interim director of Laramie Main Street because the NEA Our Town grant was terminated, which we were going to use for 3rd Street. They have sent an appeal letter for that. And so hopefully the appeal will allow those dollars to come back and be used. And they had other plans for reapplying for potentially some other funding. I think that those were the big ones from that meeting.
Thank you. Councillor Freed.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. 2 weeks ago, the Ranch Advisory Committee held a special meeting where we discussed and listened to presentations about different ways to protect and utilize the ranch lands that the city owns, just as a way to get some information on it. And then the Ranch Advisory Committee met for its regular quarterly meeting last week. And the biggest takeaway there is that we are going to have a meeting out there with our advisory committee, I think on May 29th. So this will be the first time that some of us, there's a couple new members, will get out there to take a look at the ranches for the first time. And I think I've been, and some of the other folks take us on a tour. So I'm really excited about that. Then the Traffic Safety Commission met last week. We had some interesting discussions from some folks from the community who were had some concerns about parking and line of sight, and so had some great discussion from our city staff about guidelines and guidance and how we can enhance parking while keeping people safe. So really informative. Then I missed the last Railroad Depot board meeting, but a meeting next week with the board chair Janet Dewey to get some information on what I missed, and so I can report that next time. Thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Shumway.
Thank you, Mayor. The WAM Board of Directors met last month, and I just have 4 numbers to report. They're 99, 1, 26, and 27. What that is we now have 99 members out of the 99 communities that are, applause. They're all a part of WAM now. The one is the WAM is recommending a 1% increase on our contributions, even though there's a 5% cost of living, so they're keeping their costs way down, 1% increase. In 26, we received the nod to have the WAM summer meeting in Laramie.
Oh.
And in 27, it's going to go to Saratoga. How Saratoga is going to do this, I have no clue, because it requires about 300 rooms, and they have maybe 50. But anyway, that's my report.
Thank you. That's some exciting news. Councillor Bowling.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. Last week, I attended the Police Advisory Board meeting. The chief went over just some testing materials and guidelines for upcoming promotions for lieutenant and sergeant, which they are working on. Timelines are still a little TBD. And then mostly we had a sort of presentation and discussion from Sergeant Craig Lenhart on officer-involved shootings and the protocols that are in place should that happen at sort of like a supervisory and an administrative level, and how that liaises with DIS. Or DCI, sorry, and the different investigations that are going to be a result of that. And should anyone be interested in kind of learning more about that, I can get that presentation sent to you. We haven't had an officer-involved shooting for the last 12 years, which I think a lot of people, the members of the board included, attribute to increased training across the board. Yeah. To our officers, and then the leadership of Chief Brown. So That's about it. Oh, Counselor Lockhart and Counselor Richardson and I attended a tour of the Saffron facility yesterday morning. Yeah.
Monday.
Yeah. It's pretty cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's nice to know that, you know, they really want to move forward with that. It's just going to take a different approach than what we had originally talked about. So.
Great. I look forward to that tour. I had a conflict. Yeah, maybe we can set up one for the rest of us. Counselor O'Doherty.
The Laramie Advisory Commission on Disabilities met, and they're getting ready they're going to be tabling at the Pride Fest, and on Freedom Has a Birthday, be giving out ear protection and eye protection, sunglasses and things, and raising awareness about disabilities. I failed in my territorial park duties, so that was at the same time. That was at the same time as the county open house, and I messed up there, and so I should do what somebody just said: get together with them and find out what I missed.
Counselor Freed.
And then also the Juvenile Services Board that kind of jumps around, and so I had it on my calendar for this week, and it was last week. So once again, I am failing on my liaison duties. So sorry about that. I'll find out what happened. Thanks.
Mayor.
Yes, Counselor Bowling.
Thank you, Mayor. Just one quick update. The Laramie Rifle Range Board meeting is also tomorrow at the same time as our budget session. So I will work with Tom Matamore, the board chair, to discuss any relevant updates. It's usually a pretty normal meeting, though sometimes, you know, a member gets expelled for a safety concern or something like that. So should something like that come up, I'll bring it back to the next work session.
Thank you. And I have continued to attend the Housing Coalition along with Councilor Lockhart has been actively involved, and we continue to do work. I'm on the Community Partnership Action Group, work group, and we will be meeting Friday to begin to work on an initial draft of what we're framing as a community housing central. It may include land and housing trusts, housing authority, but we're looking at housing, a nonprofit focused on housing underneath LCBA, and that they would incubate the development of that, where then they would spin off into their own nonprofit. I also attended the Albany County Mental Health Board, and Christian Cavello, who's the head of VOA, has resigned her position at VOA and will be working with the Sheriff's Office on critical incident training and law enforcement. It turns out that to do the coverage she's been doing, they have created 2 positions to cover. So they... and UW Police Chief Holland, they are working on measures to update information that comes out from campus when there is a death on campus. There's kind of a perception in the community that suicides have been rampant on campus, and actually there have been 11 deaths, both of natural and suicide causes, in 30 years. But they feel that the way of handling that has changed dramatically, and that rather than try to keep it tight and closed, that it's healthier for the community for it to be more transparent, and it makes care more available for people. I have airport board 8 a.m. tomorrow. So, and I just wanted to make a couple of announcements. This is National Police Week, and you may have seen little announcements on Facebook, but I want to publicly acknowledge our law enforcement agencies in Laramie and Albany County, LPD, the Sheriff's Office, and UW Police. They have been very active in a number of boards and commissions. They attend regularly and seem very committed to community engagement. So I'm really proud of our law enforcement group. Secondly, I just want to remind everyone that the First Street Parking Neighborhood Meeting, the next one is Thursday, May the 15th, 11 to 1 is one session, and 5 to 7 is the second session. So it's an opportunity for us to be there. And the last thing, if we can take a look at the agenda. Starting with the consent agenda. Are there any concerns or suggestions? Councilor Newman?
Could staff give us like a quick rundown on 9F, what that is changing?
You want to do it? It's a minor change, Counselor, to be more clear in how folks get proclamations in front of council and what content of proclamations is acceptable. Really, we're trying to make it clearer than it already was. We thought that it should pertain to a local matter. Anything else, Nancy?
Yeah.
Okay.
We receive often requests from national agencies without a sponsoring group. And so this is just to clarify the language and the timing. So on to the regular agenda. All righty. Seeing no comments, thank you for all your hard work. And this meeting is adjourned, and we'll see you tomorrow.